There are places in this world where the earth is still wild, still hungry, still awake. Places where the boundary between the living and the dead grows thin, where ancient spirits watch from the shadows, and where the ground itself remembers every footstep. I went looking for one of those places in the volcanic mountains of East Java, Indonesia. What I found there wasn't just geology. It wasn't just science. It was something older. Something that had been waiting. And when the ground beneath my feet began to pulse like a living heartbeat, I realized I had crossed a line I could never uncross. They say the Kawah Ijen volcano breathes blue fire. They say miners descend into its belly every night, extracting sulfur from the mouth of hell itself for less than the cost of a meal. They say the crater holds a lake so acidic it could dissolve metal, flesh, bone. But what they don't tell you, what they can't tell you, is this. Some mountains don't just erupt. Some mountains watch. Some mountains remember. And when you step inside one, when you violate its sacred depths, it knows you're there. It knows your name. And it decides whether you leave. I should have turned back. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn back. But I didn't. And what happened next would haunt me long after I left Indonesia. Long after I returned to the so-called safety of civilization. Because some experiences don't stay buried. Some truths claw their way back to the surface. And some mountains never really let you go. The journey began not in the volcano, but in the villages that surround it. Small clusters of wooden homes pressed against the base of the Tinger mountain range, where the air smells of wood smoke and wet earth, where chickens roam freely through narrow dirt paths, and where the Hindu Tinger people have lived for more than 500 years. They are isolated, devout, connected to the land in ways most of us can never understand. They speak of the volcanoes not as formations of rock and magma, but as living deities, guardians, judges, executioners. I arrived in one of these villages on a gray afternoon, the sky heavy with clouds that seemed to press down on the earth. I was looking for a guide. Someone who knew the path to Kawah Ijen. Someone who had descended into the crater and lived to tell about it. What I found instead was something more complicated. More unsettling. An old woman was selling fruit at a roadside stall. Mangoes, papayas. Small bananas with skins so thin they bruised if you looked at them too hard. She was wrapping a mango in old newspaper when I approached. I told her, in broken Indonesian, that I was going to Ijen. That I wanted to see the blue flames. Her hands stopped moving. She looked up at me with eyes that had seen too much. Eyes that held a kind of knowledge I didn't want to understand. She said something in Javanese. I didn't speak the language. A younger man nearby, maybe her son, translated. His voice was flat, emotionless. She says the mountain wakes at night. She says if it breathes while you're inside, you must leave immediately. Or it will keep you. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do. Folklore. Superstition. The kind of stories villagers tell to scare tourists. But the old woman's face didn't change. She wasn't joking. She wasn't trying to scare me. She was warning me. There's a difference. She placed the mango in my hand and refused payment. Then she reached out and touched my wrist. Her skin was rough, calloused, warm. She spoke again, and this time the translation came softer. More carefully. Respect the spirits. They were there first. And they will be there long after you are gone. I thanked her and walked away. But her words stayed with me. They echoed in my mind as I prepared for the hike. As I packed my bag. As I tested my flashlight and realized how small, how inadequate it was for what I was about to walk into. And as midnight approached, as I met my guide at the trailhead and saw the mountain rising black and silent against the starless sky, those words became a mantra I couldn't silence. Respect the spirits. They were there first. The hike to Kawah Ijen begins in darkness. There is no other way to see the blue flames. They only appear at night, when sulfur gas escapes from cracks deep within the earth and ignites on contact with the oxygen in the air. The phenomenon is rare, beautiful, deadly. And it only lasts a few hours before the sun rises and erases it from existence. My guide was a man named Surya. He was in his 40s, lean, weathered, with hands that looked like they'd been carved from the same volcanic rock we were about to climb. He didn't speak much English. I didn't speak much Indonesian. But we understood each other in the way people do when words aren't necessary. He handed me a mask, a cheap fabric thing that wouldn't protect me from anything, and gestured toward the trail. I followed. The path was steep, rocky, unforgiving. Every step required concentration. One wrong move and you'd twist an ankle, crack a knee, tumble backward into the jungle that pressed in on both sides. Around us, the night was alive with sounds I couldn't identify. Insects buzzing, birds calling, things moving through the underbrush that I hoped were birds. The air was thick, humid, suffocating. My shirt stuck to my back. Sweat dripped into my eyes. And the mountain loomed above us, invisible but present, like a weight pressing down on my chest. We climbed for 2 hours. Maybe more. Time loses meaning in the dark. Your world shrinks to the next step. The next breath. The beam of your flashlight cutting through the black. Surya moved quickly, silently, as if he'd done this 1,000 times. Maybe he had. I struggled to keep up, my lungs burning, my legs screaming. But I didn't complain. I'd asked for this. I'd come looking for it. And now I was going to see it through. When we finally reached the crater rim, I stopped. Not because I wanted to. Because I couldn't move. Because what I saw in front of me froze me in place. Far below, flickering in the blackness like something out of a nightmare, were rivers of electric blue fire. Not orange. Not red. Blue. Pure, unnatural, impossible blue. The flames danced and twisted, casting eerie shadows on the crater walls, illuminating shapes that shouldn't exist. It looked like the entrance to another dimension. Another world. A place humans were never meant to see. The smell hit me next. Sulfur. Thick, choking, unbearable. Like burnt matches mixed with rot and chemicals and something metallic that coated the back of my throat. Even through the mask, it clawed at my lungs. My eyes watered. My nose burned. I wanted to turn back. I wanted to run. But I had come this far. And something, pride, stupidity, curiosity, wouldn't let me stop. Surya pointed down. The path into the crater was barely visible, a narrow trail carved into the slope, disappearing into toxic fog. He gestured for me to follow. So I did. One step at a time. Into the mouth of the mountain. The descent was worse than the climb. The air grew denser with every step. Hotter. More oppressive. It felt like walking into an oven. My clothes clung to my skin. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. And then I saw them. The miners. Shadows moving through the blue flames. Men carrying bamboo baskets filled with solid sulfur, chunks of yellow rock strapped to their backs with rope and cloth. Each load weighed 70, 80, sometimes 90 kilograms. More than their own body weight. They climbed the steep path in silence, their faces wrapped in cloth, their bodies bent under the weight, their movements mechanical, exhausted, resigned. One miner passed me on the trail. Our eyes met for just a second. His were bloodshot, empty, devoid of emotion. No acknowledgement. No curiosity. Just exhaustion. And something else. Something darker. Resignation. Acceptance. As if he'd already come to terms with the fact that this work would kill him one day. That it was killing him right now, one breath at a time. I kept walking. Deeper. Closer to the flames. And that's when I noticed it. The lake. A massive turquoise pool sitting at the base of the crater, glowing faintly in the darkness. Beautiful. Serene. Hypnotic. It looked like something from a dream. But it wasn't. It was the most acidic lake on Earth. pH less than 0.3. More corrosive than battery acid. One drop on your skin and it would burn through flesh. One splash in your eyes and you'd go blind. And I was standing 50 feet away from it, breathing air thick with its fumes, staring at a body of water that could dissolve me if I fell. The blue flames danced closer. The heat intensified. And somewhere deep in my chest, a voice whispered, "You shouldn't be here." If you've ever felt that same silence, the kind that presses against your chest and makes you question everything you thought you knew, type the word silence below. And if you want to follow more journeys like this one, journeys that go beyond the surface and into the places most people never see, consider subscribing. Because what I found at the bottom of that crater was only the beginning. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The blue flames writhed in front of me, casting shadows that moved like living things. The sulfur fumes made my head spin, my thoughts sluggish, my vision blurred. And then it happened. The ground beneath my feet moved. Not a tremor. Not an earthquake. Something else entirely. A rhythm. A pulse. Like the mountain was breathing. I froze. My body went rigid. My heart pounded in my chest. I looked down at my feet, at the rocky ground beneath me, and I felt it again. A slow, deliberate vibration. Rising and falling. In and out. Like lungs filling with air. Like a heartbeat. Surya didn't react. He stood a few feet away watching the miners, his face expressionless. He'd felt it before. But for me it was terrifying. The vibrations came from deep below, so deep I couldn't fathom it. They traveled up through the rock, through my boots, into my bones. I crouched down and pressed my hand against the ground. It was warm. Almost hot. And it was moving. Pulsing. Alive. I looked around. The miners had stopped working. Every single one of them stood motionless, staring into the flames. Waiting. One of them glanced up at me. He was young. Maybe 20. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. He shook his head slowly. A warning. The breathing grew stronger. The temperature spiked. I heard sounds now, low, guttural, coming from inside the crater. Not wind. Not gas escaping through vents. Something else. Something that sounded almost vocal. Like groaning. Like the mountain was waking up. Panic set in. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. My body was locked in place, paralyzed by fear. The path I'd taken down seemed different now. Darker. Narrower. The blue flames flickered wildly, casting shapes that shouldn't exist. Figures, faces, hands reaching out from the fire. And then, through the sulfur fog, I saw a figure approaching. Not a miner. Someone else. Someone older. Was a man. His face was deeply scarred, his skin dark and leathery from years of exposure. His body was hunched, his spine curved from carrying impossible weight. But his eyes were sharp. Focused. He moved toward me with purpose, his gaze locked on mine. When he reached me, he spoke in rapid Javanese. Surya translated, his voice tight with urgency. He says the mountain is awake. He says you need to leave. Now. I didn't argue. The old miner gestured toward the path leading up and out of the crater. But before I turned, he said something else. Surya hesitated before translating, as if the words themselves were dangerous. He says, tourists come here sometimes. Young people. Foreigners. Some of them don't leave. They hear voices. They follow them deeper into the crater. And they disappear. My blood went cold. I asked what he meant. Where did they go? The old miner didn't answer. Instead, he pointed to the acidic lake. The turquoise water glowing softly in the darkness. He spoke again, slower this time, as if choosing his words carefully. The translation came quietly. She is hungry. The real story was only beginning. What came next would test everything I thought I knew about fear, about survival, about the thin line between the natural and the supernatural. If this story has gripped you so far, if you feel the weight of what I'm describing, consider subscribing. The journey only gets deeper from here. And I promise you, the truth is stranger than anything you've imagined. We started climbing. Fast. Too fast. My lungs screamed for air, but every breath was poison. The old miner led the way, moving with a speed that defied his age, his condition, the weight of decades spent in this toxic hell. Surya followed close behind, glancing back every few steps to make sure I was still there. Behind us, the breathing continued. Louder now. More insistent. The ground pulsed with each exhalation, as if the mountain itself was straining against something. As if it was trying to break free. I stumbled, catching myself on a rock that burned my palm. The pain was sharp, immediate, but I didn't stop. The old miner turned back, grabbed my arm with a grip like iron, and pulled me forward. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. The message was clear. Move or die. As we climbed, I made the mistake of glancing back. Just once. The blue flames had grown taller, more violent, more alive. And in the center of the crater, near the edge of the turquoise lake, I saw shapes. Figures. Standing perfectly still. Watching us leave. They were human in form but wrong in every other way. Too tall. Too thin. Their limbs bent at angles that defied anatomy. And they didn't move. They just stood there. Staring. I told myself it was the sulfur. The fumes playing tricks on my oxygen-starved brain. Hallucinations caused by toxic gas and fear. But deep down I knew better. I'd seen something. Something that shouldn't have been there. And it had seen me. We reached the rim just as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. I collapsed onto solid ground, gasping, shaking, my body drenched in sweat and fear. The old miner stood over me, his expression unreadable. He said one final thing before walking away. Surya translated, his voice barely above a whisper. The mountain lets you go this time. Don't come back. I watched the miners descend again. Back into the crater. Back to the blue flames and the acidic lake and the breathing earth. They did this every night. Twice a night. For $13 a day. Risking their lungs, their bones, their sanity, their lives. And they did it without hesitation. Without complaint. Because for them there was no choice. The mountain demanded tribute. And they paid it with their bodies. With their futures. With everything they had. But there was more to their story. More than just economics and survival. I learned this later, after I'd recovered enough to ask questions. The Tinger people don't see the miners as victims. They see them as participants in an ancient contract. A balance between the human world and the spirit world. The sulfur they extract isn't just a commodity. It's an offering, a sacrifice, a way of acknowledging the mountain's power and appeasing its hunger. The Tinger have lived in the shadow of these volcanoes for centuries. They've witnessed eruptions that buried entire villages. They've lost families, homes, livelihoods to the fire and ash. And yet they stay, because they believe the mountains are gods. Living, conscious beings that protect them when honored and destroy them when ignored. Once a year, during the Yadnya Kasada ceremony, thousands of Tinger people climb to the crater of Mount Bromo, a neighboring volcano, and throw offerings into its mouth. Vegetables, fruit, livestock, money, flowers. They stand at the edge and toss their prayers into the abyss, hoping the gods will hear them. Hoping the gods will grant them another year of peace. And at the bottom of the crater people wait. Locals, beggars, men desperate enough to risk their lives climbing down into the volcano to catch the offerings before they hit the ground. Because they believe those offerings carry blessings. Luck, protection. It's not superstition to them. It's survival. A way of maintaining balance between the human and the divine. Between life and death. Between the earth and the fire beneath it. I didn't understand that when I arrived. I didn't understand any of it. But I understand it now. The mountain doesn't belong to us. We belong to it. And when we forget that, when we treat the earth as something to conquer, to exploit, to dominate, we pay the price. Sometimes slowly. Sometimes all at once. I left Java 2 days later. My lungs still burned. My throat was raw. My hands were blistered from the heat and the toxic air. But it was my mind that couldn't recover. I kept replaying the moment the ground started breathing. The figures by the lake. The old miner's warning. The shapes in the flames. And I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me out of that crater. Something invisible. Something patient. I carry a piece of sulfur with me now. A small yellow fragment I picked up near the crater rim, where the miners drop pieces on their way up. It sits on my desk, next to my passport and a faded photograph of the mountain. A reminder of what I found in Indonesia. A reminder that the world is not as tame as we pretend. That there are still places where the earth is conscious. Where it remembers. Where it judges. Where it decides who lives and who disappears. The Kawah Ijen volcano is real. The blue flames are real. The miners are real. The acidic lake that could dissolve you in minutes is real. But what I felt that night, the breathing, the voices, the presence, that exists somewhere between fact and faith. Between science and spirit. Between what we can measure and what we can only feel. And maybe that's the point. Maybe some truths can't be measured with instruments or explained with equations. Maybe some things are meant to be felt. Fear. Respected. Not understood. Just accepted. The Tinger people understand this. They've lived with it for generations. They've built their lives around it, their rituals, their beliefs, their identity. They don't question the mountain. They honor it. They feed it. They fear it. And in return, it allows them to live in its shadow. For now. But the balance is fragile. The world is changing. Tourism is increasing. More people are descending into the crater every year, snapping photos of the blue flames, posting them on social media, treating the volcano like a theme park attraction. And the mountain is watching. Always watching. Waiting. I wonder sometimes what will happen when the balance tips. When the offerings stop. When the respect fades. When the mountain decides it's had enough. Will it erupt? Will it breathe one final time and swallow everything around it? Or will it do something worse? Something quieter? Something more personal? Will it start taking people? One by one. Until the message is clear. I don't know. I'm not a prophet. I'm not a shaman. I'm just someone who went looking for an adventure and found something far more complicated. Far more unsettling. Far more real than I ever imagined. So what do you think? Would you take that journey knowing what I know now? Would you descend into a volcano that breathes, that watches, that remembers? Would you stand at the edge of that acidic lake and feel the ground pulse beneath your feet? Would you look into the blue flames and see the shapes moving inside them? Share your thoughts below. And if this story moved you, if it made you question what's real and what's myth, if it made you feel something you can't quite name, then subscribe to join me on the next one. Because there are more stories like this. More places where the earth is still wild. More journeys into the spaces between the known and the unknown. Until then, stay curious, stay brave, and never stop seeking the truth. Even when the truth is buried in the heart of a mountain that should never have let you leave. Even when the truth is carried on the backs of miners who sacrifice everything for $13 a day. Even when the truth is written in blue flames that burn in the darkness and disappear with the dawn. The mountain is still there. Still breathing. Still waiting. And somewhere deep inside, in the places tourists never see, the spirits are watching. Always watching. Remembering every face, every footstep, every breath. And they're waiting for you to come back.